Hi everybody, Dave here. We're back in the workshop. We have not much of a technical project to talk about today, but a company that I want to mention more thoroughly, and that's Paradigm. This is a pair of Paradigm Mini Monitor V.6 that I picked up recently for a very reasonable price. They have some condition issues, which we'll take a look at. You can see the corrosion on these screws that are holding the front plate on. We've got some dinged up corners, maybe a little. So we'll have to do some of our normal corner repair. It looks like the person had them laying down. They've got bumper feet on the side. But what I really want to focus on, and we'll show you the inside of them as well. There's one interesting feature about them. And it's the feature that I saw that really made me realize we need to talk about Paradigm, because Paradigm is one of those companies that's been around since the early 80s. They're part of the Canadian consortium of speaker manufacturers. There's 4 or 5 others that are surviving even today. Probably the most well-known one in terms of high-end audio these days is Martin Logan. But you've got Energy, you've got PSB, you've got Paisley, Once Upon a Time, which we made a video about Paisley before. And a lot of companies were technically invested in and invested with that Canadian National Research Corporation on psychoacoustics. So they learned a lot about psychoacoustics from that investment that Canada made as a company. And the people that stuck with it, like the people at Paradigm, they don't make speakers that just look pretty. They don't make speakers that just measure well. They make speakers that sound really good, all right? And for a good value, what I think is a good value. I'll pop up a picture during this video of some of the various Paradigm speakers that I've worked on, bought, sold, serviced, etc. And every one of them has been a really nice value, I thought. And it's because they're controlling everything in that company. Their manufacturing facility winds voice coils. They make the speaker boxes. They made an investment so that they would control everything. And they do control almost everything that they're doing. They have their own, it's the largest privately owned anechoic chamber in the Northern Hemisphere, I believe, in the world of the Northern Hemisphere. So that shows the commitment and the investment that they've made in acoustics and in loudspeakers and in design and technology to be able to produce something with good materials, with good value, and that sounds good, right? So let's pause right there and let's take a look at these mini monitors in a little more detail, and I'll show you the aspect of it that really got me thinking we need to make a video focuses on Paradigm. So we'll go through our typical history of the company, the people that are involved. We'll take a look at some of the patent information, which I looked up earlier, and I've got that set aside, and we'll add that to this video so you get kind of a whole rounded view. We'll take a look at the business history. They've been bought and sold, and then the original owners bought the company back from an investment company. So that tells you that they didn't like the direction and they wanted to stay focused on what they do well. All right, let's take a break and let's focus on the design here. All right, I mentioned Mini Monitor V6, and when I first looked at these, I saw this piece of plastic here, and I said, that's one piece of plastic. It includes this waveguide for the tweeter and this outer portion of the mid bass and the logo areas, all on one piece of plastic. How can that be? So I was thinking about actually covering these in some nice cherry, because cherry is one of the alternative designs that they made this speaker with. And these happen to be the black ash, it's vinyl wrap, black oak, whatever. So I took off the 8 screws, and look what we have here. Let's zoom in on this so you can see it a little bit. All right, so we have a baffle plate mounted to the baffle board, and it's good, thick particle board construction. It's got some damping, it's ported. I got a basic crossover in there. But this was what was interesting. So you've got a mounting for the tweeter. The entire mid-bass driver is all one piece molded with this tweeter housing, and then with this little trim piece at the bottom. So the entire basket is all part of this one assembly, all molded as one piece. That's quite a piece of tooling, actually. So I was very impressed when I saw that. And so I started looking into it a little bit more, and I've learned that they have some interesting technology for the integration of surrounds into baskets. They have a couple patents on that. And I found what I thought was one of the more interesting patents we'll look at, which is how is the cone attached to the bobbin, which is the voice coil is wound around the bobbin. So it's basically a piece of plastic tube or cardboard tube, and those voice coil wires are wound around it. And so there's always a question, how do you attach the inner diameter of the cone to that bobbin? And they have an interesting patent around how to do that. In fact, the founder of the company, his name's on the patent, and it's a fairly recent patent. So that made me realize, these guys are making an investment to make a tool that looks like that. That's not a cheap tool, and you have to make a lot of parts to pay for a tool like that at a reasonable price. So that's the story of this pair. We're just going to clean up some of this corrosion, repaint the screws, clean it, make it look a little prettier, clean up the boxes, square off all the corners, fix all these dings. And as far as this pair of Mini Monitor V6s go, they're done. So we'll come back and show you that finished pair. We'll do a listening session, but the rest of the video we're going to focus on what we've learned and what there is to learn. I think that's worthwhile to think about on the company name Paradigm Electronics. That's their name. Before we move on, here's a quick view inside the box. I pulled out the little bit of fiberfill insulation that was in there, but you can see we've got a couple of resistors, a couple of inductors, 3 or 4 caps, all mounted to the binding post cup. So a circuit board that holds all those. And by the way, yes, they actually make and stuff their own circuit boards at Paradigm as well. So that's another interesting point. Let's make sure we show you the 2 part numbers. There's the mid-bass driver and the part number for the tweeter driver. And there's another label down underneath. Let's make sure you can see that. 6 ohm tweeter. V.5 T25 70-H, 6 ohms. Here's a little collage of all the Paradigms I've had over the time recently. This is a PDR8 subwoofer. Next up, I think these are the Titan V2s. This is a PDR10 in cherry, very nice. Next one is a Titan V1. This one's the Mini Monitor V1. They weren't as good as this pair that we're working on now. This is the Studio 60 V2. This is an awesome pair of tower speakers, very powerful. My video on how to rebuild the tweeters comes from this pair. that I was able to work on and eventually purchase and sell. And then there was a matching center channel that went with that. So this is a Studio 60 center channel. And then here's our Mini Monitor V6. Very nice speakers. All right, let's start our little sidebar to learn more about Paradigm. Paradigm Electronics Company. From their website, a very complete website, and I would encourage you, if you're at the least a bit interested in Paradigm as a company, go here. But also there's quite a bit about audio here. So follow in the Explore section here. You can see a lot about technology and design and about sound and R&D. And there's also a history lesson. This page gets into the entire history of Paradigm as a corporation, starting with this guy Jerry and Scott Bagby. We'll talk about Scott a little bit more. And I learned by watching another video we'll refer to, Scott was working in a retail electronics store selling stereo equipment, and he thought he could do better. And so he and Jerry formed their own company, and the rest, as they say, is history. And of course, you can read all these key points inside their little timeline here. One of the key points that's referred to in here is that they worked with the National Research Corporation of Canada, and that's part of their whole business plan. Sorry, National Research Council is the correct name, the NRC. And this became pivotal in how Paradigm developed, along with the other companies I mentioned earlier. A lot of the Canadian companies that are now well known and started by working with the National Research Council of Canada and basically learning how to make better speakers and that sounded better. And so they focused on that, and that's been the foundation of their entire company history, actually. If you take a look in the timeline, you'll see here in 2001, they built this factory. There's a photo of it, and I mentioned earlier as well, they wanted to control more and do more so that they had end-to-end control. And just take a look at these bullets here in this list of all the things that they brought in-house. It's astounding, frankly. There aren't that many vertically integrated companies that do this kind of thing anymore, but they certainly are one of them. So you can read through the rest of this, won a lot of awards. It's the foundation of how they've continued, and I think this is a key point, and this is what I think of when I think of Paradigm. The price and the value, the quality that you get for the price that you pay is very high. And I think they do that by controlling that quality. They control the precision, they control the variation, and they produce a very consistent product of good quality. And that's part of why the reputation is what it is. Another place that we can look inside here is more about this National Research Council. And if we scroll, and this is on the Paradigm website as well, this is a very interesting set of charts and a description. What the National Research Council on Acoustics learned was that if you want to have good sounding speakers, you want these three things: a flat mid-range, a smooth response, whether it's on axis or off axis, where the sound is similar, and you want to have low distortion. If you can do those three things, you're going to make nice speakers. And they do this. This is what Paradigm is known for. And it's shocking. It also reminds me kind of GR Research. If you we should make a video about them some point, but this is what Danny focuses on at GR Research as well. Very interesting little point there. I'll jump to this at the Toronto Engineering Society. This was 2008. Scott Bagby, that's a picture of him, made a video, and this video is now posted on YouTube. I'm not going to play the whole video. I'll let you do it, but Scott gets into the entire history of Paradigm from his perspective, why Paradigm does what it does, what are the principles and values that they have as part of their mission as a company, and how they've tried to maintain and grow that over time. A fascinating video. So highly encourage you to spend, I think it's 8 minutes long, spend the time to listen to that video as well. So if we dig into the technologies a little bit more, I'm going to jump, and you can go back to their website and learn more. But as you know, we like to look into patents a little bit. I did a patent search on Paradigm, and also specifically on Scott Bagby. Paradigm doesn't have that many US patents. I was a little bit surprised, but here's one of them that I found to be noteworthy. So if we look into this patent a little bit, here's an example of one of those principles that was just referred to on their website. You know, flat mid-range, smooth response overall, and low distortion. So this is a diagram inside the patent. This is the cone, woofer cone, or any driver cone. Here's the surround, flexible surround, and down here's the voice coil bobbin moving up and down, right? So, and this is one of the largest sources of distortion in loudspeakers, is when this voice coil moves in and out in this vertical direction, the cone itself doesn't stay nice and straight and uniform as is shown by the dark black line. It actually ripples like this, and this breakup and distortion happens especially at high amplitudes, and this is what essentially ruins the sound when you drive a driver too strongly. Here's an example. This patent says that it works. I don't know that it works, but patents are supposed to show higher value, and they get in and they describe through this patent how they minimize the distortion of the cone itself. So this is supposed to be the before, and this is the after, and notice how the amplitude of the distortion of the cone is much less, and it's accomplished by inserting a damping material, a damping ring, between the bobbin, voice coil moving up and down, and the cone. So, and you might think, well, how does that work really? Well, the answer is, there's some stresses going on inside this material number 56, which is some sort of polymer that has certain kinds of elastomeric coefficients and Young's modulus, so that it essentially acts as a damper for the cone. So you might think, well, isn't that not going to translate all the sound that you're putting into the bobbin? Yeah, it might, but it might do some damping, but it might also allow you to drive it higher in amplitude without having the cone breakup that is a typical source of distortion, as shown here. So and Scott's name is on this patent. So I think, and this is a fairly recent one, I think 2001 or 2002, so only a couple years old. The point is, Paradigm's an old company, been around for a while, since the early 80s, but they're still trying to innovate. And I'm now going to look for this little damping ring and see if they've actually put it in commercial products. I would guess the answer is probably yes, but I don't know which ones, and a lot of their products are higher end than I would typically buy. But you never know. I may be able to come across a pair and look for this little damping ring right here. So let's move on. Unfortunately, like a lot of companies, Paradigm was bought by a private equity company. And I say bought by, it sounds like this company, Shoreview, entered into some sort of agreement with Paradigm and with Scott and the other owners of Paradigm. This is just some of the companies that Shoreview owns today. I looked down through that list and I didn't see anything that matched well specifically with why they might be interested in buying Paradigm, but they did. And I would guess that the owners also cashed out a little bit. Now, it turns out that this happens quite a bit in these private equity buyouts. Things may not be going as well as the private equity company thinks, and then of course the original owners are still kind of there running the ship, but they think they can do better and they don't want to be encumbered. So in this case, Scott and John Bagby bought back their company. They bought Paradigm, and during the time that Paradigm was owned by that Shoreview equity, that Shoreview equity also bought Anthem and Martin Logan. Well, Scott and his brother John ended up buying back Paradigm, Anthem, and Martin Logan. And this happened in 2019, and they still own it today. So Paradigm, Anthem, and Martin Logan are owned by Scott and John Bagby. They may have some other stakeholders. I don't know. I didn't look that up. But the point is, that's a pretty powerful combination right there. Martin Logan, obviously well known for their electrostatic speakers, Anthem for power systems, DSP. And if you listen to the video that we referred to, Scott mentions how important DSP is going to be in the future for continuing to shrink the size of speakers, keep the performance high, and be able to do that with some digital control capability. So very interesting. I don't know about you, but I like to invest my time and money in people that care about audio and acoustics, and these guys clearly do. It's their focus. It's been their life's work. So I don't feel a second thought about investing my time and my energy into learning more and using their products. Speaking of their products, as we kind of transition back to our Paradigm Mini Monitor V6, here's a review that was written. This is in Absolute Sound back in 2009 about the mini monitors. There's the rosewood one on a stand. There's a really nice article here. I would encourage you, if you want to learn more about the mini monitor speaker, the V6, it explains all about the inside and the outside, and Steve really likes them. Bottom line, which appeals to everyone, is that the minis offer a surprisingly high level of sonic quality for a ridiculously low price. And who doesn't want that, right? I don't have the grills for mine, and I think it's evidently they came with grills, but you'll note that even in the press pictures here, they don't show them with the grills on. And I think they're trying to feature that mid-bass driver and, the fact that it's translucent and maybe also this baffle plate as well. So that's a little bit more about Paradigm. Hopefully you enjoyed that. You've enjoyed what we've done with the speakers. They're done now, so let's put them together, take a final look at them, and we'll have a quick listen to our little Cha-Cha Fontanes. here they are. We've completed the touch up on all the corners and the edges. Those are all cleaned up. We've taken care of all the corroded screw heads. We'll do a little listen here. Please consider liking the video. Hit that button down below. Consider subscribing to New to You Speakers as well. We try to give you something different that you don't get on other channels. And with that, let's enjoy some Cha-Cha Fontanez.